What is up, you guys? It is Mr. What If here bringing you a lovely new video today. And this is going to be part 2 to What If Eri was in class 1A part 2. So, let's begin. Last left off at Deku, All Might, and Eri being at Dagobah Beach, and All Might popped the question to Deku, would you like to inherit One for All? And Deku would start to cry a little bit, saying that yes, Deku would start to cry a little bit, saying yes, and Eri would say, wait a minute, how is that even possible to inherit somebody's quirk? And All Might would explain all for one for all, the whole backstory to Deku, but this time, Eri is there listening to everything. And this is when All Might would say, I was expecting you to bring your little girlfriend with you. And then Eri would blush again, would start blushing dramatically, and then Deku would blush a little bit and say, well, she wanted to tag along to see if I was going to be alright, so I said, why not? And if it's not a problem with you, All Might. And then All Might would say, not a problem, and that's why I invited a friend of mine. And you guys could probably guess who this friend of his is. Yes, it is none other than Mr. Aizawa, aka Eraserhead. And Mr. Eraserhead would say, sorry about that background noise. Mr. Eraserhead would say hi. Mr. Eraserhead would, of course, look like he hasn't had any sleep in years. And he's holding a coffee mug saying must, and then on his coffee mug is let me sleep in peace. That's what it says on his coffee mug. Let me sleep in peace. So yeah. Deku and then All Might would tell Deku about that whole, oh, he needs to train his body before he can inherit the quirk. And then Deku would say, really? That's all I've been doing. And then All Might and Eraserhead would say, And then Eraserhead would say, it makes sense. Kids nowadays are actually devoting themselves to training with their quirk. And then this is when Deku would say to All Might, he doesn't know. And then All Might would say, no, he doesn't. And then Aizawa would say, what are you guys talking about? And then Deku would explain that he doesn't have a quirk. He's actually quirkless. And then Aizawa would spit out some of his coffee dramatically and saying, what? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. And then he would turn to All Might saying, this is the kid that went up against the sludge villain and actually did some damage to the sludge villain in order for you to finish him off. And then All Might would say yes. And then Deku would say, well, I didn't really do much to hurt the sludge villain guy. I didn't really do too much. But any natural person that wants to be a hero would just help out. And then All Might would explain the reason to why Mr. Aizawa was here to train Eri on using the special techniques. And then Eri would be in shock that All Might thought of her. And then Mr. Aizawa would say, well, she does have the long hair for it. And then this is when Deku and Eri would look dumbfounded a little bit, saying, she has the hair for it. And then Mr. Aizawa would say one of the reasons how he's able to use the claw, use his scarf that he's using, is basically off of the flowment of his hair. It's not just his quirk, but the flowment of his hair. And this fighting technique, the more your hair flows, the better you would be at the technique. Since you kind of have long hair, since you have long flowy hair, you should pick up learning how to use this fighting style with the scarf in a good amount of time before the entry exam starts. And then I'll say a good 6 to 7 months has passed. Yeah, 7 months has passed, so there's 3 months left before the entry exam. And Deku is good 8% of One For All's power. Can use a good 8%. And Uri has learned a good margin of 35% on using the scarf ability. Using the scarf martial arts technique. And then this is when All Might would have an idea on saying, how about Uri would fight me while Deku would fight Mr. Aizawa. And then Deku would say, well, I'm up for the task, what about you? And then Uri would say, yeah. And then I'll say after the 7 months, Uri has actually boosted her confidence. So when it comes down to fighting, she's not like Deku in this, because Deku would really, in this, Deku wouldn't mind a battle. Deku actually kind of likes to go head to head with somebody in a battle. Doesn't matter how many people is there, he just loves a good fight. And then Uri would be somewhat 10% of that extent of Deku's fighting conscience. So yeah, she has some confidence in fighting. And then I'll say, so let's begin with All Might versus Uri. Uri knows that the only way she can stop All Might is to send him back into his small might state by touching him and rewinding him back. Rewinding him back into his small might state. And then she can wrap him up and declare victory. So she goes with this plan. And then All Might knows that her quirk is rewind, and she might try to rewind him to like a weaker point, or just send him straight back to his small might form. So All Might is kind of expecting this. So All Might and Uri go at it, and Uri is actually holding her own against All Might, and All Might is using 15% of his power. And then Uri would actually land a couple of kicks and punches on All Might, actually doing a little bit of damage. And All Might cranks his power from 15 to, I'll say, 18%. Cranks it up to 18. And then Uri is still standing her ground. She's not having any difficulty. She just thinks that since All Might is now using 18% of his power, he's just gonna move just a little tad bit faster, and his punches are gonna be a tad bit stronger. So nothing that she can't handle. And she's actually doing well. And All Might says, wow, Mr. Aizawa really must have done some really trained her. I'm impressed. And then All Might cranks his power to 20%. Then Uri would start to look like and then a couple of attacks that All Might would throw at it. Uri looks like she's actually gonna lose balance, but she gets back on balance and is standing her ground once again. And All Might's impressed, and he's like, even at 20% of my power, she still looks like she's not having any difficulties fighting me. And Uri is once again landing a couple of blows, jabs, kicks on All Might, just to throw him off a little bit. And then she would use a scarf, of course. She would use a scarf to like wrap his arm, and then quickly like wrap his arm, like quickly wrap around his arm, pull herself into close to him, and then like punch or kick him, like Spider-Man's launch attack. Like if you ever seen like gameplay of Spider-Man PlayStation or played the game, and you know that little launch attack when Spider-Man shoots out both of his webs like into a far distance, and then pull, and then like slingshots himself towards his enemy, and then like does a double kick or a punch, or punch them or do a double kick. Yeah, that's what she's basically doing to All Might using the scarf. And then All Might would crank his power straight up to 25%, and then Uri would start to get off balance a little bit. Starting to get off balance, but she's trying to maintain herself and keep her composure. Excuse me. And then All Might would crank his power up to 29%, and Uri is starting to have some difficulties a little bit. And then Uri knows that if All Might cranks his power up to 30%, she's gonna lose this fight, so she's gotta end this now. So Uri goes blind for it. She takes off the whole entire scarf, and then she starts to run at All Might. She's running, she's booking it. She's just running. And then she takes off the scarf while she's running, while she's booking it, and throws it at All Might. And then it would stagger All Might a little bit. And then All Might would get free. And then Uri would quickly, and then All Might would throw, and then All Might would say sorry, but I have to do this to end this fight. I have to do it just to end this because time is getting ready to close out. And then All Might would say 30% Delaware Smash, and then he would throw a punch towards the ground, making a shockwave. And then Uri would be expecting this. Uri would say thank you. And then Uri would say out loud, thank you All Might for using this punch. Using this powerful punch on the, thank you for using this powerful attack. Now I've just won. Then Uri would do that, what's it called? Uri would run up All Might's arm and kick All Might in the face. Then All Might would try to grab her as she launched herself into the air. But soon as All Might looks to grab her, she is right behind All Might, and she touches All Might in the back, rewinding him back to his Small Might form. And then before All Might turns back into the Small Might form, he uses a 15% Detroit Smash. But Uri quickly at the last second dodges it. And Uri is convicted the winner of the fight between her and All Might. And now we get into the fight between Deku versus Mr. Aizawa. Mr. Aizawa instantly turns off Deku's quirk, and then Deku would notice that Mr. Aizawa must have. And then Deku would try to go for a 5% Detroit Smash. And then he would realize that the quirk isn't working, and he's like, what's going on? And then Deku would realize that this must be what she meant, what Eri meant about Mr. Aizawa's quirk. And yes, Eri and Deku did give each other some heads up against the two people that they'll be fighting. So yeah. So Deku was like, oh, so he really does have the power to turn off quirks. And Deku says, now I just need to figure out how he does it. And now Deku's thinking in his head that it must be a radius. So Deku is trying to make some space between him and Mr. Aizawa. And Mr. Aizawa is getting confused on why he's making this big gap of space. But Deku would try to go in for a 5% smash, finger flick smash, but it seems like it's still not doing anything. So Deku was thinking that it must be a large radius. And then Deku would say, well, if it's a large radius, I can't really do nothing. And then Mr. Aizawa would have enough of with Deku making all this confined space for no apparent reason. And then Mr. Aizawa would charge at Deku using the scarf as whips. And then Deku was trying to dodge, but every time he dodged, Mr. Aizawa, Eraserhead, would move faster than before using the scarf as whips. So yeah. And then Deku, and this is when Deku realized that even if it's a radius thing, and then this is when Deku would think that this is why All Might decided this. He wanted me to know how it would feel like if I ever went up against somebody that has the ability to turn off or cancel out quirks. And then Deku would turn to All Might and give him a smile, and then All Might would say so he figured it out. And then Eri would say, what do you mean he figured it out? And then All Might would say, the reason why I had you fight me and him fight Eraserhead was to give you to a feeling of like going up against powerful opponents that are way more skilled in combat than you. And then Eri would say, well, in a way, Mr. Aizawa's quirk is like my quirk, except instead of rewinding, it turns off quirks. And then All Might would say, didn't you, and then All Might would briefly remember saying, didn't you say that your quirk would be able to rewind injuries and wounds and all that? And then Eri would say, since I'm more stronger than I was when we first met All Might, I can basically heal somebody without any problems or any recourse to myself. It might be permanent, but yeah, I can heal somebody. And then All Might would say, would you be able to heal my injury? And then Eri would be in shock and say, I can try. And then Eri would say, you might feel some pain, All Might. You might feel a little bit of pain, All Might, so be brief about it. Then All Might would say, long as it fixes me, I'll be alright. And then let's cut back to Aizawa versus Deku. Deku is throwing punches, kicks, is throwing rapid punches, flurries of kicks at Mr. Aizawa. And Mr. Aizawa is currently dodging all of this with a smile on his face. Sorry about that. With a smile on his face. And Deku would start to smile himself. And then Deku at this point is playing by time. He knows that even if Mr. Aizawa's cancellations quirk is a radius thing, it has to have a time limit, right? And then, even though Deku doesn't know that the quirk works by Mr. Aizawa's eyes, he's got that completely correct. And Mr. Aizawa is basically impressed on how fast Deku's movements are. And then this is when Mr. Aizawa's eyes would start to have a recoil on his eyes, start to hurt. And then Deku would see that Mr. Aizawa is staggering just a little bit, but not enough to make it noticeable, but Deku notices it. And then Deku would say, so this must be the limit of his quirk. Alright, I got this. Then Deku would actually go in for a punch. This is when Deku would go in for right hook. This is when Deku would go in for a right hook, and then Mr. Aizawa would dodge, and then Deku would say, "Got you." And then Deku would kick up some sand, and the sand would actually get into Mr. Aizawa's goggles and get into his eyes. And then Mr. Aizawa would start to stagger. And then Deku, for a brief second, gets the idea that his quirk is connected by his eyes. And then Mr. Aizawa would go for one more attack, and Deku would dodge, and then Deku would say, "Smash!" Would yell out, "Smash!" And this is when One For All would kick in. This is when One For All would kick in and actually punch Aizawa in the gut, knocking Aizawa 50 feet back. Well, technically 162 feet, but who's really measuring the size and capacity of the punch? I'm not, but yeah. And Mr. Aizawa is deemed knocked out from this gut punch, and plus the sand being in his eyes and running on stamina. So yeah, this actually knocks out Mr. Aizawa. And then All Might, and then a few minutes go by, Mr. Aizawa is waking up, cleaning out his eyes, and this is when Uri has finally got enough power and stamina to heal All Might's injury, and All Might will start to go into his buff form. And then Uri says, "I finally finished healing All Might." And then Aizawa and Deku would see All Might being in his buff form, and then All Might would run and hug Uri, saying, thank you so much." And then Uri would say, "Thank you," Uri would whisper in All Might's ear, saying, "Thank you for giving me a chance to fight by the one I truly love side." And then All Might would say, I knew you had some feelings for young Midoriya," whispering in Uri's ear. And then Uri would blush and nod her head yes. And I'm going to be wrapping it up here with the fully healed All Might, a tough and stronger Uri. So yeah, this is gonna be a dad. Technically, this is gonna be a Deku X Uri ship, and a father and daughter relationship between Uri and Eraserhead. So between Eraserhead, or between Mr. Aizawa and Uri, father and daughter, and between Deku and Uri is, of course, the X relationship, which is the boyfriend and girlfriend relationship, and of course the casual, now healed All Might, and 10% of All Might's powered up Deku, the father and son bonding. So yeah, I'll be leaving it right here. Like, subscribe, comment down below on how your day was today. Catch you in the next video. Peace out, fams.